Hey everyone! Welcome to our channel, where truth meets entertainment. If you love celebrity stories, untold secrets, and jaw-dropping twists, you're in the right place. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss an update. What made Joni Lamb leave her marriage in a single night will astound you. Everything she believed to be safe was destroyed by a startling incident after years of ministry and public smiles. Trust was shattered, secrets were revealed, and Joni made a choice that would permanently alter her life. Was it a secret, betrayal, or something more sinister? See why Joni put an end to it all by staying until the very end. All night. For many years, even after Marcus Lamb passed away, Joni Lamb was regarded as the dependable, strong lady who kept Daystar going. She presented a picture of a family that was firmly based in their faith, serving God, and persevering through all of life's challenges. Thus, her marriage to Doug Weiss felt like the next phase of a lovely tale. Doug was a famous Christian therapist, and many thought he would be there for Joni, providing stability and consolation while she guided Daystar into the future. People were inspired to believe that even after loss, healing and fresh starts were possible by their pictures together, their silent grins, and their common faith. However, as time went on, crack began to show up in that flawless image. People noticed that Doug and Joni were not going to events as frequently as they used to. Doug would occasionally be absent from church events where they used to stand side by side, and when he did show up, there was a noticeable stiffness between them. The little looks that had conveyed affection and support suddenly seemed hollow or aloof, and the warm grins felt forced. Once admirers started to question whether there was a problem behind the scenes, silently muttering about how different they appeared. While the cameras were not in use, even more indications started to appear to those closest to Joan and Doug. The burden of being in the spotlight suddenly weighed heavily on Doug, who had spent years advising couples and helping them through their difficulties. He was always being watched, his background being examined, and every action being evaluated when he married Joni Lamb. Doug had never experienced this level of pressure before, and it started to have an impact on him profoundly. According to friends, Doug felt the burden of having to live up to the perception that people had about Joni and her family and battled with the expectations that were put on him. The burden was also being felt by Joni, who had dedicated her life to defending Daystar's mission and Marcus' legacy. Trying to juggle a marriage that was subtly failing with the demands of running a ministry like Daystar was already difficult. She was unprepared for the burden of being separated behind closed doors. According to others, they began to dispute on how to balance their personal lives with missionary activity. Joni urged Daystar to stay committed to the plans she and Marcus had created. According to reports, Doug had his own opinions about how things were to be conducted, which caused friction and silent disputes. Previously regarded as a lovely tale of trust and second chances began to resemble a partnership that was having difficulties. Their public interactions, their avoidance of one another's gaze, and their use of measured, careful language when discussing their marriage all demonstrated the growing distance between them. It became evident that the flawless facade they had given the world was starting to fall apart, exposing the difficulties, conflicts, and suffering they don't hide any longer. It served as a reminder that even the most devoted and well-liked leaders have their moments of weakness and that, despite their public personas and smiles, real individuals were struggling to keep their composure. Behind the manicured social media posts and Daystar's lights, a different story was subtly developing in Joni Lamb's life even as it was quietly falling apart. She continued to be seen by the public as the resolute, religiously motivated leader, always smiling and calm and prepared. However, beyond that solid facade were rumors, whispers, and an increasing feeling that something wasn't quite right between her and Doug Weiss. The hints were subtle at first. People observed that Doug was missing events where he would typically be with Joni and wasn't present as frequently. When they did appear together, their fast smiles and good chemistry looked artificial. Faded quickly, and it was difficult to ignore the remoteness in their gaze. According to those close to them, Doug was finding it difficult to handle the tremendous strain that came with being Joni Lamb's spouse. Doug has been a well-respected counselor for many years, offering wise guidance and assisting couples in repairing their marriages. However, Being married into the Daystar family meant that you had to live under continual scrutiny, with every action and every word under examination. The strain began to wear Doug down because he was accustomed to helping others without being seen and evaluated. Even with those he trusted the most, friends saw that he appeared distracted, worn out, and occasionally aloof. Joni was battling her own silent struggles at the same time. She felt a great deal of responsibility for keeping Daystar strong following Marcus's passing, which was already a big load. It was made even more difficult by the addition of a stressed-out marriage. They disagreed quietly over how to manage the ministry and their lives. Joni wished to preserve Daystar's legacy and continue to operate the business as she and Marcus had created it. Doug allegedly had his own opinions on how things ought to change, but these disagreements caused friction and resulted in minor arguments that escalated, becoming more significant annoyances. Conjecture about what was going on behind closed doors began to circulate along with the rumors. Others hinted that Doug might be coming to terms with his past legal woes, while others whispered that he was coping with personal matters that he hadn't disclosed to the public. The whole story was unknown, but people were chatting, and each little rumor added to the unsolvable conundrum. Did Doug have a secret? Was Joni attempting to shield Daystar from an impending scandal? Without answers, the whispers just grew louder as the inquiries continued to expand. Additionally, there were rumors that the stress was being felt by Joni's family, particularly her kids. In the hopes that Doug would provide their mother strength and consolation following Marcus' passing, they had backed their mother's decision to be married again. However, it was also said that they could also sense the strain of the quiet conflicts taking on behind closed doors. According to others, the family struggled to decide how to respond, attempting to protect Joni while simultaneously fearing about Daystar's future in case things kept going south. Joni and Doug decided to remain silent while these rumors spread. They failed to address the inquiries or rumors, believing that remaining silent would safeguard them and the ministry. However, that quiet only made everything worse. Every unresolved query led to the growth of another rumor. People began to wonder if Joni and Doug's flawless photo was actually a staged image for the cameras, with the true tale kept away because it was too difficult or terrible to tell. According to several insiders, Joni had learned facts about Doug that caused her to reevaluate everything. Others claimed that although Doug wanted to leave the marriage because he was overwhelmed, he was unsure of how to do so without causing trouble. There were tales of silent sobs, restless nights, and fervently prayed prayers as Joni searched for meaning amid bewilderment and disappointment. Doug was also allegedly had periods of uncertainty, questioning whether he could meet the demands of becoming a part of Joni's environment. Their romance wasn't the only thing at stake. It was about the faith of millions of people who looked up to them, the ministry, and Marcus's legacy. Joni was aware that her choices would have an impact well beyond her private life, affecting Daystar, her loved ones, and the numerous individuals who had faith in her leadership. Every decision felt unachievable under the weight of that obligation. There were discussions going on behind the scenes. Friends attempted to assist. Family members attempted to negotiate, and pastors offered advice, but the conflict persisted. Joni and Doug's quiet deepened, and the gossip became louder than what they were attempting to conceal. After admiring their love story for a while, many were left wondering what had gone wrong, and if the pair they admired could somehow mend the wounds without making them visible. The battles persisted as the weeks stretched into months, waged in strained glances and whispered discussions, in the quiet moments following events when the cameras were not rolling, and in the lonesome hours of the night when it was impossible to deny the reality of their difficulties. All of Joni and Doug's beliefs about faith, marriage, and the price of living in the spotlight were put to the test during this season of secrets, rumors, and quiet conflicts. It served as a reminder that every flawless picture conceals a human tale of hardships, decisions, heartache, and hope, awaiting the truth's light to at last make a breakthrough. People were shocked when it was announced that Doug Weiss and Joni Lamb were divorcing. Everyone who had followed their journey felt as though the ground had moved. Only a few months prior, they were portrayed as a couple who had discovered hope after suffering a loss, smiling and standing together at Daystar events, holding hands on stage, and discussing faith and fresh starts. People were left wondering what had happened because everything had changed. Many people saw divorce as more than just the dissolution of their marriage. It was the conclusion of a tale they trusted. People wanted to see Joni rediscover strength and love after Marcus Lamb's death. And that new chapter seemed to be Doug. He was well-liked and renowned for counseling couples, and seemed to be aware of the obligation and strain that accompanied Joni's presence. Their union seemed to be a testament to their faith and a reminder that God can create beautiful out of nothing. However, there were unseen silent conflicts going on behind those well-guarded moments. People started to realize something was wrong in the weeks leading up to the divorce announcement. At events when he would typically be present, Doug was absent. Additionally, the grins he had with Joni did not reach their eyes when he was around. Even though they were standing close to one another, there was a gap between them, a rigidity that suggested tension they were trying to conceal. Although they were aware, fans assured themselves that it was only a difficult season and that they would recover. However, in actuality, the fissures had existed for a time, and each day that went by, they were becoming deeper. After years of teaching people how to create solid marriages, Doug was now confronted with the fact that his own was failing in front of everyone. The demands of being the ideal husband to a well-known person like Joni, the burden of upholding one's reputation while juggling personal difficulties, and the pressure of living under the watchful eye of the Christian community emerged excessively. According to those close to him, he found it difficult to accept the fact that everyone was watching him, that his background was being scrutinized, and that the man who had once felt comfortable offering counsel was suddenly feeling insignificant in his own house. Joni had a lot on her plate, too. She had sacrificed her life for Daystar, endeavored to carry on Marcus' legacy, and was attempting to balance her own suffering with her faith. She had a sense of being behind the scenes. She was aware that every choice she made would have an impact on her ministry, her family, and the people she trusted. She didn't take leaving a marriage lightly, especially when it was in the spotlight. She wept, he prayed, and she struggled with the shame of failing once more in front of everyone who held her in high regard. There were rumors as soon as the news of a divorce surfaced. Some claimed that Joni was unable to cope with Doug's legal troubles. Others asserted that tensions that could not be resolved were caused by differences of opinion regarding Daystar's direction. While Joni was adamant about maintaining the ministry as she and Marcus had created it, there were rumors that Doug wanted more authority. According to several insiders, the fight began modestly, but gradually every discussion devolved into a dispute. Every choice turned into a conflict, and the once strong love was eclipsed by ongoing hostility. The divorce was yet another unexpected tempest for Joni's family. After welcoming Doug into their lives, her kids were left feeling wounded and perplexed, wondering how something so innocent could have gone so wrong. They had desired their mother to see her smile, to know she wasn't alone, and to find pleasure once more. They were now making an effort to shield her from the critical remarks made by those who were unaware of the inner suffering concealed beneath the outward smiles. Doug had to deal with his own criticism. How a marriage counselor could allow his own marriage to fail was a mystery to many. And nobody failed to notice the irony. The man who had been assisting people for years are in the midst of a highly visible failure to find optimism in their relationships. And he found it difficult to deal with the associated shame. He made an effort to remain anonymous, but the inquiries persisted. Furthermore, the reports of legal issues only made matters worse. The divorce was seen by the Christian community as more than just a private matter between two individuals. It served as a reminder that nobody, regardless of how powerful they seem, is impervious to breaking. Those who had trusted the story of Joni and Doug were now left wondering what was authentic and what was a staged appearance. Once a source of inspiration, the pair now served as a reminder of how quickly things can change and how brittle even the most seemingly solid marriages can be. Joni had to deal with the anguish of losing another marriage during the peaceful times. This time, the entire world is watching. She questioned whether she had made the proper decisions, if she had acted too hastily, and whether she had overlooked any red flags. She was disappointed, not just for herself but also for all those who had trusted her story. She was aware, however, that maintaining a dysfunctional situation for show was not the solution. Despite the pain, she had to choose the truth, and have faith that despite her suffering, God could still utilize her narrative. Like everyone else, Doug had to pick up the pieces of a life that had broken apart in unexpected ways. He had to accept the fact that love isn't always enough to make things right, and that even the best of intentions can be ruined by the stress of living under continual observation. Everyone was surprised by the divorce, which changed the course of events and made what appeared to be turning a fairy tale into a tale of hardship in real life. It served as a reminder that every well-known person has doubts, worries, and a heart that may break just like everyone else's. Additionally, even if it meant taking different routes, it was an opportunity for Joni and Doug to find healing. Ultimately, the divorce marked the start of a new chapter in their lives, one in which they would need to be honest, mature, and have faith. Take the lead. Many believe that the narrative had peaked once Joni Lamb and Doug Weiss' divorce was made public. However, a fresh storm that would rock everything even more quickly started to emerge. The rumors that Doug might be in legal jeopardy began subtly among tiny circles. People initially dismissed it as gossip, just another tale circulating in the mayhem of a divorce in public. However, the whispers increased louder as the days stretched into weeks, and it soon became evident that something significant was taking place. For years, Doug Weiss had established himself as a well-respected Christian counselor. He always presented himself as a man of integrity and faith while assisting couples in overcoming significant marital problems, addiction, and betrayal. Now, that picture was being criticized. The rumors that Doug was being investigated for financial mismanagement in his counseling firm began to spread. There were several rumors. It was coming from various individuals who said they had worked with him or had contacts in the ministry. They claimed that customers were dissatisfied, that there were concerns regarding the handling of funds, and that confidential legal complaints had been made. Doug felt as though everything was falling apart around him. His reputation and career were in jeopardy, and he had already lost his marriage. Once trusting people began to have second thoughts, questioning whether the man who had helped them mend their marriages had been concealing personal truths. Worried about the response if the reports were confirmed, churches that had invited him to speak started to cancel. The strain was oppressive, and Doug was alone with fewer allies than he had anticipated. Joni Lamb, meanwhile, was fighting her own war. She had made ministry her life's work. First with Marcus, and then attempting to carry on his legacy after his passing. Getting married to Doug was meant to be a fresh start, a tale of trust and hope following tragedy. Allegations connected to that chapter now threatened to undermine what she had fought for. People started to ask awkward questions, despite the fact that the legal concerns were related to Doug's private company and not Daystar. Was Joni aware of these problems before to her marriage to him? Had she been duped by a man who wasn't who he claimed to be, or had she disregarded warning signs? The questions came from all directions and were never-ending for Joni. Prayers were offered by supporters, however. Some reviewers were eager to pass judgment. They questioned her about what this would imply for the ministry's future, why she hadn't anticipated this, and why she hadn't shielded Daystar and herself from the consequences. Knowing how easily one incident could destroy the trust they had developed with viewers over decades, Joni had always taken care to preserve Daystar's reputation. After all, she was now caught in an uncontrollable storm. Doug attempted to defend himself, claiming that the allegations were untrue and that he was being unfairly singled out by those who wished to bring him down, but he was tied to the transgressions of someone she had once loved and trusted. According to his close friends, he felt deceived, that those he had assisted were now rejecting him, and that the divorce had already caused him enough pain without these charges. He maintained that any errors in his company were really small miscommunications that might be resolved, and that he wasn't the bad guy that everyone was portraying him as. But explanations were insufficient in the court of public opinion. Every can-led speaking event, every whispered chat, and every headline was doing harm. The legal controversy involving Doug turned into a test of faith and trust for the Christian community. Those who had depended on his advice were uneasy and wondered if his words had always been sincere. Not wanting to leave someone who was struggling, but also not wanting to jeopardize their own reputations, ministries that had collaborated with him battled with the choice of whether to support him or turn away. It was a turning point that made people see that even leaders can make mistakes and that even inside the religious community, discernment is necessary. Joni in her silence. Moments that struggled with confusion and regret. She questioned whether she and Doug had gotten married too soon. She replayed conversations in her mind, searching for clues that she could have missed if she had disregarded God's warnings in her haste to move on following Marcus's passing. There were times when Doug's words and deeds weren't consistent. She felt a great deal of remorse, but so did everyone else who had trusted their tale. She felt accountable for the suffering that other people were now experiencing, the perplexity that had descended upon Daystar, and the problems that lacked simple solutions. Practical considerations were also present. Would Joni be forced into the legal quagmire if the accusations against Doug resulted in legal action or monetary fines? Even if Daystar wasn't personally involved, would they still be affected? Attorneys suggested that she keep quiet in order to safeguard the ministry and herself, but doing so just served to feed further rumors. With each day that went by without a definitive answer, the questions became louder because people felt that quiet implied guilt. Some started to notice weaknesses in Doug's public defense as the inquiry into him went on. Former workers came forward with tales of financial mismanagement, unfulfilled promises, and customers who felt deceived. Others supported him, claiming that the charges were fabricated by those hoping to get financial gain from his demise and that he had aided them when no one else would. Everyone was left in a state of confusion since the truth was complicated and the judicial procedure moved slowly. The legal tempest was just one more difficult chapter in Joni's life, which had already been filled with hardship and sorrow. She affirmed her faith, telling herself that God could provide even good things from the worst circumstances. On other days, however, the burden felt too great to bear. She had to take charge of Daystar, provide for her family, and keep up her public persona. The unsolved questions hung over everything, and even though her personal life was in disarray once more, she prayed for strength, wisdom, and the clarity to know what she should do next. Would Doug face criminal charges? Would he lose his job and his counseling license? Would Joni be able to keep Daystar and herself out of the spotlight? Or would the ministry be permanently impacted by the scandal? Would the audience abandon them after years of trust? Or, in the midst of the storm, would they discover understanding? Ultimately, the legal battle and, for everyone concerned, the unresolved questions turned into a test of faith. For Doug, it was about accepting the repercussions of his decisions and figuring out how to restore what had been destroyed. For Joni, it was about preserving what was left while pursuing recovery and future direction. Additionally, it served as a reminder to their supporters that even the seemingly strong can falter and that accountability, grace, and truth Vermont